like you. Prefer us trapped in melancholy with the wood wands of holly. Suggestions that obliterate to camouflage the folly. Attempted mental robbery, executed sloppily. The hypocrisy, this mockery, and walk the talk with me. Put the hands up to touch the Akasha, cause you know deep down there's something bigger than your wallet.
So we, eternal balance of all that is good, true, and beautiful, friends. Welcome to your Thursday edition of Rogue Ways. Today we are going to talk about some astronomical symbolism. Really both. We're doing both. But we're talking about the symbolism of the planets and the heavenly bodies that, depending on if you're a flat earther or not, either revolve around our heads or are something else entirely, right? Or I guess they do both either way. But today we're going to look at some stuff that I've been looking at. This is just my most recent romp into randomness, which is what I tend to do. I don't know if you guys know this, but basically I bring you shows based on my flavor of the week, which changes obviously week to week. There's just so many billions of things that I am fascinated by and interested in, and so I go studying down myriad paths and get snagged into all kinds of topics. And so today it was astronomy and astrological symbolism, and so I decided to share what I am looking at with you. It is like anything. If you're learning about something, when you share it with somebody else, then you are cementing your understanding and you're learning yourself. So the best way to understand something is actually to teach it, which is awesome because I've been a teacher my whole life, so it helps me understand lots of things over and over again. So that's what I'm doing. I'm sharing my learning with you. I'm no expert. I don't claim to be at all. Well, the things I'm sharing with you are probably going to be pretty basic to a lot of people, but it'll be fun. So we'll look into some various stuff. What's up, Raleigh Dangler in the chat? And we got some other people watching. If you want to say hi, come over to YouTube or DLive. If you are watching on Facebook, I will not hear you. It says that I am broadcasting to DLive. It's not working. Of course, every episode something has to happen that makes no sense and is unexplainable, inexplicable. Nobody can explain it. And I'm actually quite tech savvy, and yet no matter what I do, shit just goes wrong sometimes. So hopefully the DLive will start to work, and hopefully I finished my thought and said that if you are on Facebook, I do not see your comments until afterwards, which is totally fine. But if you are wondering why I don't respond to you, that is why. Hop over to Rogue Ways on YouTube, and that will be fixed. What's up, Gnosis Gnome? Nice to see you. What's up, Billy John? Billy John's in the house. I am going to show you guys a few things, just like I always do. Gonna show you some stuff here. We've got my site. Corey Sharman is my pen name, but you can also type in rogueways.org and get to the site, the same site, corysharman.com or rogueways.org. There's lots of stuff, things I write, things I do, things I collect that I think are beautiful and share with you here. There's the tag collection down here in the noosphere that you can navigate that way if you like. I think that's a fun way to jump around the site. There's lots of eclectic stuff here. You can link to my Subscribestar from here. You can find all of the old episodes of Rogue Ways here. You can find my books that I've published so far here. I am closer and closer every day to publishing the sequel to Sine Curve of Aeons, but Sine Curve of Aeons is here. This will link you to buying it on Amazon. If you want to buy it directly from me and cut out the tax and the shipping, I will ship it to you anywhere in the United States. You can PayPal me $15 flat, and I will inscribe it and include some Rogue Ways stickers for you. If you want to get the hardcover, I don't have those. You'll have to click here and I'll take you to Lulu to buy a copy there. You can also get my memoir from teaching on a Native American reservation. It is irreverent and hilarious. And my collection of poetry, which you can also find massive amounts of free poetry on the site if that's what you're into. You don't have to buy the book at all. You can read about the tarot readings that I give, the deck that I use, my philosophy, and here is a link to that PayPal that I mentioned. If you want to buy the book or a tarot reading, you can use this link, paypal.me/Corey Sharman. And you can click over to the shop and you can find all kinds of stuff. There's Rogue gear sold here. I'm wearing this exact shirt that you see in this image right now. There we go, Rogue Ways. They're awesome clothes. I tried to pick the high quality ones that are, fair trade and organic and stuff when I could. So they are a little pricier, but that's just what I prefer. So if you want to support the show and pimp some cool gear, you can go there. I also make Orgonite pendants and art. I have a few left up here. If you are interested in these, you can buy them through the site. If you are in connection with me outside, through Facebook or some other method, you can buy them that way from me directly instead of going through the site. That is up to you. I also teach classes of various kinds and offer tarot readings, which is under the classes and tarot heading. And then the Logic Convention, we still have a week or more before I'm going to call it, but my fingers are crossed, so I'm still planning on pulling it off. So we're going to have our gathering at the Eco Shamanic Retreat outside of Wrightsville, Pennsylvania, right on the Susquehanna River. We're going to do a really cool, mystical, synchro-mystic, magical, historical tour along the oldest river in the world with Michael Wan, and just hang out with our crew because that is what's fun. So that's the site. Check it out. You can get all of these episodes on audio at SoundCloud or any podcast app. And please do support me and the show at Subscribe Star. For years, I have done this for free. It would be awesome if I could get some support. If you find any value in Rogue Ways, please consider sharing value back with me. I will continue to provide content for free, but you could also find more goodies on Subscribe Star. And if you want to support the show or find more content, you can do that. So the $1 per month is a pretty easy goal for anyone to accomplish. I think if you are listening, you could probably afford $1 a month. So at least consider doing that, and then the higher levels get you various perks. So $7, $22, and $55. The $55 level gives you a tarot reading per month. That is a discount from a 10-card tarot reading that you would normally get. It's a $5 discount, and you get access to everything on Subscribe Star. So check those things out. That's Subscribe Star. And let's see who is over in the chat. Hopefully DLive is working. It says it's working, but as always, bullshit is bullshit. Facebook is working. That's good. What's up, exactly? Nice to see you here tonight. We got some peeps in the house. So, I don't want to show you my email. But tonight we're going to talk about astrological symbolism. We got our solar system here, which you can see, unfortunately, doesn't include everything. You can probably tell what's missing really quickly because they took it away from us for a few years ago, and they, I think, brought it back and then took it away again. I don't fucking know what's going on, but Pluto's not on this, and I couldn't find a good one with Pluto in it, which made me really upset. It's kind of like the modern ability of our times. They can just decide something is true, and then it just like sort of disappears. I'm sure we can find plenty of books that it's in, but not so many images. I mean, there were images with Pluto in it, but then none of them looked nice like this one did. They were all kind of whatever. I'm a picky person, so let me just see. Play around with this a little. Hopefully that keeps everything in the frame. But yeah. Oh, thank you so much, Volley, for the super chat. I very much appreciate it. I appreciate it. What's up, Chad Clemens in the house? Pigeon Jimmy John is the real James Bond. I can't contest it. What's up, Mateo? Nice to see you guys. So again, we're just going to go through each of the planets and heavenly bodies that have some symbolic meaning in our history, and we're just going to look into the various traits and ideas that are associated with them. So if that's your thing, that's what's coming up. But like I said, these are the things that I've just been trying to cement more fully in my brain and possibly work with more. And so this is my mini foray, my beginning foray into these things. And, you know, some of it's stuff that I've known and heard before and sort of like been familiar with, but I have to kind of organize things in this very linear, structured way for my brain to like really get it in, and then I have to repeat it a lot. And like I said, teaching is the best way to learn something. So sharing it with you for the very selfish reason of cementing it for myself. And hopefully it'll help you too. That'd be great. So first we're going to start with Mercury. This is apparently, and this is where like the whole flat Earth, not flat Earth, you know, we can fight all we want about that shit, but it doesn't matter. We're not really going to care. But I did find the supposed pictures of these heavenly bodies for us to look at, and I just find Mercury fascinating looking. It's like the moon, but in Technicolor, without maybe as many sort of like big C's like the moon has or something. But it's pretty weird looking. This is how they presented it. There's many different pictures, you know. And I'm not sure, like maybe some are like heat maps or like topological or topographic or something, you know, I don't know, but this was a picture of Mercury and I was like, huh, that's fascinating that Mercury is a Technicolor moon. But here's Mercury, we're getting into Mercury. This is the symbol for Mercury. It's very interesting to me. It has elements of the masculine and the feminine. I liked this artistic rendering of it because it's, you know, done in the element of Mercury, or the liquid Mercury, or however, the metal Mercury, which is a cool artistic little flair there. But you know, and it looks like a little person to me. Obviously, there's some symbolism going on here. We have the cross, which is a very earth-centric sort of grounded, balanced figure. And then we have the circle, which is its own eternal, you know, full of symbolism. And then we have this like crescent moon, but the way it's placed makes it look like horns, which is very interesting given, you know, the things that we'll look at that Mercury might represent. And I liked too that this image is on the backdrop of this sort of ancient, or not ancient, but, you know, like a medieval maybe drawing of like a serpent, because I didn't really know that Mercury was related with sort of serpentine sort of things, which is interesting. So this is the symbol for Mercury, and let's see. Yeah, I was gonna grab the cartoon Pluto and throw it in that image, but I ran out of time, so that would have been fun. So this is Mercury. And this book that I'm going to have a bunch of screenshots in my notes from in here is from this book called A Dictionary of Symbols. I'm probably holding this upside down. You probably can't read it. But it's by someone called J.E. Cirlot, I believe. Cirlot. It was translated from Spanish, which was written by Jack Sage. It is from the Philosophical Library. I'm sure there's people that will have their problems with that, but it is a very interesting reference resource, and it was translated in 1962, so who knows when it was actually written, but it's a little bit older, but it is fascinating in its academic accuracy and its sourcing and its eclectic sort of absorption of all sorts of different aspects of myth and science and everything to sort of draw into this dictionary. So it looks a little bit like those really hokey dream dictionaries, but it reads more like a academic primer. It's very interesting. I just so happened to open to the coolest page that I should have done first. Maybe I'll do this next show. I'll earmark it, but it's a page on graphics, and it has like the basics of the symbols, and that I'm going to make this bigger for you guys for a second. Before we get into Mercury, indulge me. This just so happened to come up, but it's this page that has sort of the interpretations and meanings of all these different elements of the symbols themselves for all of the things that we're looking at today. So that's fascinating. I'm going to go back to that. Man, I don't have a bookmark. Here we go. So anyway, cool book, cool resource. It even has pictures. It's rad. I just like jumped out at me at a used bookstore one day, and I was like, I must own this, and now I do. So, what's up, Trey Clark Theories? What is up, all of my people? I think I said hi to you, Chad. If not, what's up, Chad? Yes. So, Mercury. Marie Curie equals Mercury. Yeah, that's an interesting sound alike. It's very, very interesting. What's up, Steve Mercer? Nice to see you here. So, back to Mercury, the planetary god of the metal bearing his name. In astronomy, he is the son of heaven and light. It's interesting, just like Lucifer and Jesus, these like imageries, these pieces of symbolism seem to get mixed together a lot. In mythology, he was born of Jupiter and Maya, In essence, he is the messenger of heaven. We've seen Mercury with his little winged sandals, so we know he's like a messenger sort of character. He's also known as Hermes in Greek, and Hermes in itself is this entire, we could do a whole show just on Hermes and the concept of Hermes and all the different ideas of what or who Hermes might be. It's fascinating in itself, and so Hermes being related with Mercury has always been fascinating to me. He's an interpreter, he's a mediator. I did not know that he conducts the souls of the dead to the lower world. That is fascinating to me. I had no idea that was him. I did not know that he was triform, or represented with 3 heads. I did know that Hermes Trismegistus was, had that element of the Trinity embedded within him, but I had no idea that Mercury had a similar aspect, but it makes sense if they're the same person, right? He epitomizes the spoken word, or the emblem of the word. That's interesting to me to think of, the power of the spoken word and the emblem of the word. Thinking of words and letters themselves as symbols, and as that, they can be used to create in the world, especially in spellcasting. He is the supreme logos scattered about the universe. That is interesting too. There's this idea of like logos being sort of juxtaposed to like passion or emotion, or almost like subconscious sort of elements. And so he would be the opposite of all those things. He's sort of the logic and the clarity, the knowledge spread throughout the universe. Alchemists have used Mercury in all kinds of ways, in all kinds of interpretations. He's the god of roads, it says. So that's how we got travel to be associated with Mercury, I guess. He's the intellectual energies. The nervous system is controlled by him because the nerves are messengers on the biological plane. And they're also kind of like roads, so that makes sense that he would be sort of in charge of the nervous system, or associated with the nervous system. And therefore, I guess, when Mercury is in your chart or something, if you're doing astrology, then the negative aspects of it can be like a nervous, sort of tense energy. Where am I like this. So he's the god whose metal is white and decidedly lunar, I guess just because of that color. So that would be sort of feminine. However, since Mercury is the planet nearest to the sun, which is related to gold and not silver, the resultant archetype has a double nature of both the sort of masculine and the feminine. So there's a hermaphroditic nature to Mercury. I don't know in astrology if it's, because usually things are designated male or female. I don't know if they've like chosen one for Mercury. I did not look at that. Maybe I did. Maybe it's coming up actually. I don't remember it at the moment. But here at least it's pointing out this hermaphroditic nature of it, which is interesting too. Oh, thank you so much, Trey Clark, for your super chat. I appreciate it very much. What is the upside down cross? That is the symbol for Mercury. My PC has no fan, or the fan on my PC is not on. It's seriously, it's so frustrating. I am technologically savvy. I know how to use all of my sound devices. I have it set to have only one input and only one output. The OBS is set to only take in that one input, which is the only input that's even on. There's no fan on in the room. My computer is not humming or making a fan noise. But that sound has been somehow added into my shows for the past 3 shows or so. I don't know. Just like everything that happens to me, no one can explain it, no one can fix it. So it's very frustrating. I'm very sorry that that's annoying. I wish that it could be fixed, but maybe someday. I'm scared to buy a really expensive microphone because I'm going to get it and then the same exact shit's going to happen and I'll have the same problem where I can hire someone whose whole job is just sound engineering and they'll seriously say to me, that doesn't make any sense, it shouldn't happen. And I'll say, exactly, like everything that happens to me. So, yes, it's the fan of enlightenment. It's the little Luciferian trickster plopping bullshit into my path that I have to overcome in order to grow. I guess my growth has to do with putting up with bullshit that doesn't make sense. I think I remember Crow identified the rooster as a symbol of Mercury. I don't know. It's not in this tome of sort of eclectic knowledge about Mercury, so I'm not sure where he might have gotten that or what there is to that or not to that. It's not tied into the two snakes on the medical symbol. There's a ton of symbols we're going to go into that have the caduceus tied into it, and Mercury is sometimes seen, I think, carrying the caduceus. But I don't think that symbol in itself is necessarily tied directly to Hermes or Mercury, except in that a lot of sort of like gods and enlightened beings and healers and stuff will be carrying that caduceus because of what it symbolizes. My phone is not on, so it's not my phone. Snakes are not always deception, no. Snakes can represent deception as from like a certain standpoint of like the reptilian. It depends on how you look at things. If you believe literally that there is like a Satan or you know, devil that tempted Eve in the form of a snake, then yes, the snake can represent deception in that way. If you think of it as like the snake is our sort of reptilian mind, you know, our base self, and our sort of base desires sort of taking over from logic and what we know is right, then that is a form of deception in a way. You could look at it that way. But it just depends. There's so many things that the pages, like I think the snake entry in this book that I'm using for a lot of these at least is like 3 or 4 pages long. So there's a lot going on with snakes, but one of the possible things is that they can represent deception, or just a lower level of being. So yeah, anyways, back to the hermaphroditic nature of Mercury. Mercury is not only male and female, masculine and feminine, but Mercury also has an aspect of it that is like devilish or monsterish, but also an aspect of it that is enlightened and sort of godly. So that's another very interesting aspect of Mercury. Mercury is one of the more complex symbols that we're even looking at. It just so happens to be the first planet, so this is the first one I did. But it represents that ability to go from the sort of inferior to the superior, or that base that we were just talking about with the sort of snake might represent, up to the sort of height, which maybe a bird with wings might represent. So Mercury is in there as that sort of, you know, I think that's part of why Mercury represents the road, is because Mercury represents the path from the base level to the heightened level. And the Gnostics look at it similarly too, that the, you know, your base sort of sexual energies can be helped to rise through your body by the Mercury that's like literally within you, in your like spinal column, literally physically, and that's the road that you travel to activate your, you know, crown yourself and bring heaven here on earth and all of that stuff. So Mercury is a part of all of that transformation through the path, and travel and messaging, and that's how it became associated with all these things in astrology, right? When we read when you see these little symbols in this sort of clip that I have here, these are from like your really basic astrology site, which I purposely did because I want to see, you know, first how the academic sort of symbolic like came together and what it might mean, and then look at how that's been sort of translated into our modern tiny picture window of the symbol. So that's what I'm looking at. Yes, that's right. Mercury has to do with that rising Kundalini energy, which is interesting because we were just talking about the caduceus, and the caduceus has a lot to do with that as well. The two pathways alongside the Mercury channel representing the, you know, combining of the masculine and feminine, and this two entwining snakes around the center staff representing that as well. Is the mic fucked up? I'm so fucking sick of this shit. My, not you, Chad, but my NSA agent Chad is just like laughing right now. He's like, this is great fun. So I'll turn it off and on again. Did that work? My mic literally physically show it to you. Yeah, it's a Samsung Meteor mic. It's not unidirectional. It's the one that's neither unidirectional nor omnidirectional, if that helps. But I'm also using OBS, and I'm also you just saw the settings where I turned off all other mic inputs and outputs except this one. I don't know. Can you guys even hear me? It went off and on, but it isn't good now. I don't know. I'm gonna give up. Maybe next time I'll sing that song for you. Did that not work? I also turned off my audio input through OBS and turned it back on again. Neither of those things help. For real? Reverb and hissing and a high-pitched squeal. Background fuzz is okay. And if that's all, if there's no high-pitched squealing and reverb and hissing, I think I'll continue. It's fucking ridiculous. There's like 5 people just left because they were like, fuck this. Dude, that's all I keep hearing. I promise you there's not a single thing making any kind of fan noises, or there's no windows open, there's no air moving. I'm gonna go on. hopefully you can hear me, and hopefully you can not be dissuaded by whatever random fucking sounds someone decides to inject into my live stream. But going back to Mercury being brought down to this sort of basic level of astrological interpretation, we can see how Mercury is the messenger god. I didn't know these are the things I'm trying to get better at too. He's the ruler of Gemini and Virgo. So Gemini and Virgo are both associated with Mercury. It makes sense for Gemini because Gemini is the twins, right? And then twins, they represent the two opposing, sort of the duality of everything. And Mercury has that duality in it, so that makes sense. And Virgo makes sense to me because of my understanding of how Gnostics look at Virgo. And Virgo is that virginal energy that can take that sort of base sexual energy and transform it into something, and that's the Immaculate Conception to them. So that makes sense to me too, that Mercury would be associated with both of those astrological signs. With zeal, with great zeal I will go on. I'll give up another day. Not today, oops. So day-to-day expression and communication, again, that makes sense given where Mercury came from and what it represents. Take things apart and put them back together again. Ooh, that makes sense too. That makes sense too if we're talking about the alchemical process of starting from the base metal and bringing it up to the, gold. We saw that in Mercury's description as well. Here, disassemble into their parts to recombine them into the perfect marriage, or whatever it's called, the alchemical wedding. And then it says it's an opportunistic planet, decidedly unemotional and curious. That's interesting. I did not get that from the description, except I guess the logos part makes sense. That's just pure logic and kind of detached. I could see it. In modern times, we tend to meet people's Mercury first. Many people make a connection for the first time through emails or talking or whatever, chatting. That makes sense. So we kind of see their the way they communicate. Alright, and then it talks about nervous energy and stuff too. So that all makes sense with Mercury. I kind of understand why they might have put this sort of half moon on Mercury as well. Mercury looks like it kind of combines the sun symbol, the earth symbol, and the moon symbol. And that is very interesting when given all of the things that we just saw that Mercury is associated with. communication between a sort of masculine and feminine and the road that like joins them together. Pretty interesting. Moving on to Venus. Bad cable. Could be a bad cable connecting me. Everything's plugged in firmly. So this is Venus, allegedly, again. Who knows what's actually going on and what those things are up there. But if they are planets in a space, in a vacuum of space, then this is Venus, according to NASA. Just looks like a pearl. It's kind of pretty. I kind of like that image of Venus. What I noticed is that even if you don't buy NASA, as being real and space as being real, when you look at the pictures they've created for each planet, they sort of match what the planet's supposed to represent. And so that may be one more indicator that it's all a bunch of fake bullshit, or it might be an indicator that we intuited their meanings and qualities correctly way back in the day. But this is Venus's sign, and this is another way of looking at Venus. Again, I don't know why there's so many different ways of looking at a planet. This one looks like it's on fire and dead, and this one looks like a milky pearl. They're both allegedly Venus. But anyway, Venus's symbol is the same as the symbol for female, if you're familiar with that symbol. And Venus is a very feminine planet, so it makes sense. And of course, again, it's weird to me that the symbol combines the symbol for the sun, basically. It's actually the symbol for the moon, I just realized. It's the full moon. And the earth, both of which are feminine, so that makes even more sense now. Bingo. This is why it's fun to talk about shit that you're just learning. And the entry in my little book that I shared with you guys is very small for Venus for some reason. The planet Venus is in alchemy related to the goddess of love and also to copper. I did not know copper was a metal associated with Venus. I don't know many of the qualities of copper, so I'm not sure if we went looking at those what we would find in common, but that's interesting. It is associated with the moon. That makes sense given its full moon portion of its symbol, and in particular, and with Mars. Doesn't make sense to me. Mars is like masculine and angry and fiery and whatever, so why is it associated with Mars? Maybe it's like Mars's wife or something. Maybe it's the feminine counterpart to Mars's masculine. Its spiritual significance has two aspects, that of spiritual love and that of mere sexual attraction. When I thought of Venus before I read this, I would have just thought of the spiritual love aspect. But this doesn't give any. Usually this book gives a lot of evidence and citations and whatever, and this one doesn't give any. And so I'm like skeptical. So I'm like, why did they leave it out of this one, and why is it so small? Why is it such a short entry? But it says it's mere sexual attraction also, and that some have come to regard its true symbolic significance as physical and mechanical in character. And those are just so opposite of what I think of. But I also acknowledge that everything has its sort of, forward-facing, open aspect of it, and then also the sort of subconscious or the, not necessarily reverse, but twisted version of it. So it does make sense that it would have that duality within it in that way. Maybe that's all there is to that. No ground on micro PC. I don't think I have a ground. I don't know. I don't have that nice of an audio setup. It just bothers me because it was totally fine forever. All the audio is fine, and then now all of a sudden it's crappy. I guess I'll just buy a new one, and hopefully that works. But yeah, seriously. If I ever meet my NSA agent Chad, we're probably gonna have a hug fest, because I'm gonna feel so sad for him if that's the life that he's chosen. But here's the again, the sort of basic mainstream sort of astrology interpretation of Venus. I don't say that because it's bad. I just say that because this is kind of what we've like wheedled it down to. It's the broad overview. It's generic. That's all. It's not a bad thing. It's just the entry level. So Venus is the goddess of love. Of course, we know that. I think most people know that. Venus has dual rulership over Libra and Taurus. Again, does not make sense to me. Some of them make perfect sense to me. I'm like, yeah, I can see that. And then this, I'm like, why Libra? Libra's like scales and balance and, seeing all sides of things and being very rational and logical. And Venus doesn't strike me as like a logos, rational, objective sort of energy. And then Taurus is just like bullheaded and, stubborn and unmoving. So I don't get those two associations. If you get it in the chat, yell it out, share it with us, because that doesn't make too much sense to me. And I tend not to remember things that don't make sense to me, or things that I just move past quickly. So it represents two areas in our life, love and money. And the reason why is because love, goddess of love, planet of love, and money has a lot to do with usually what we value, and love has a lot to do with what we value. And so I think that's why that does make sense to me. As much as money kind of seems like a, it's an object and it's kind of dirty and we look at it as like evil almost sometimes, it does make sense. And I have seen in life how your money and the way you acquire it often has to do with what you value. Or if you don't acquire it, it also has to do with what you value. So that I can get it. And also the pleasure we take in life. That makes sense too, especially going back to that mechanical version of love. Grace, charm, and beauty are all ruled by Venus. Through Venus, we learn about our tastes, pleasures, artistic inclinations, and what makes us happy. It's like this very indulgent energy, but in a non-excessive way, I feel like. Indulgent in like a growing way, like indulging in what you sort of need as a soul or something. We look to Venus to see how we approach relationships of the heart, what gives us pleasure, give and take of relationships, security of relationships, the thrill of the conquest, blah, blah, blah. So that's Venus for us. Pretty simple one. No, seriously, my laptop is making no noises at all. Like, if you were here in real life, you'd be like, there's not a single sound. Like, there's nothing making noise in this room except my mouth and my mouse. Every once in a while, that's it. It's really stupid. People have been saying it for, I don't know. It's been a problem all of a sudden in the past maybe month or something. Every once in a while on a random episode. So it's not that either. Someone even said, like, I can show you how to, like, replace your fan or whatever, get a fan to, like, cool it down or whatever. I'm like, it's not, there's no fan. There's nothing happening. Anyway, nobody usually includes Earth in their, in the astrological sort of, like, signs and astrology base. I've never heard of Earth in my chart or anything. So I wanted to include Earth because Earth is still a planetary heavenly body as far as I know. Or it could be, at least, and it has its own meanings and values associated with it. So, Earth. Here we go with Earth. This is Earth's symbol. Like I said, the cross has to do with Earth. I mean, we have the 4 directions on Earth. We have the 4 states of matter. We have all of these aspects of the number 4 that have to do with this sort of totality of physicality and the completion of that way of being here. And so it's interesting. It makes sense. We see this symbol over and over again through all of these various different religions and cults and organizations all throughout history. This exact symbol of the circle cut into 4, and it always represents the Earth. So it's very interesting. It does, but it makes perfect sense when you think about what the Earth's all about and what being on Earth is like. So we've got that as our symbol for Earth. Again, we have this very short entry in this book. I don't know how you could give something as massive and complicated as the Earth such a short entry, but it is interesting what they say about it. They say the northern hemisphere is regarded as that which represents light. Never thought about it. Never heard of it. However, I did have a vision once in which light was spewing out of the northern pole and dark was being sucked in through the bottom pole. And this is mirroring that vision. So the northern hemisphere is regarded with that which represents light, corresponding to the positive principle yang, which I think is also the masculine, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm bad with yin and yang. I think yang's the masculine. The southern is linked with that of darkness and corresponds to yin, which I think is the feminine. Hence, cultural movements pass from the northern to the southern hemispheres. And like, who? There's a citation there, so I could go read the, study or cultural relic or whatever they got that from. But who ever said that cultural movements pass from the north to the south? And they just state it like it's fact. Like, yep, that's how it goes. I'm like, I don't know, I guess. It's interesting. It's interesting that I used to get kind of like indignant in my victim culturehood and say, like, why is, like, the northern hemisphere even the north and the south are just words, man? Like, let's put the south on the top of the map. Like, flip shit around, dude. And that's fine. Like, that's cool. Do whatever you want. We'd still call it south. It would just be at the top of the map. And we'd still call it north. It would just be top of the map or bottom of the map. But there is actually northern and southern. There really is, you know, positive and negative, and there really are poles, and there really is something that you can measure that has to do with those things. So there are reasons for things. There really, really are. But that's all that was in there for the Earth. And then in astrology, on all those sites that, you know, for the sort of distillation that I've been showing for the sort of normie level and mainstream level, there isn't anything for the Earth on any of them. So I found this from, of course, the Theosophists, and they call it the planet of the third ray. And there's this idea of rays of oh God, I'm going to butcher it, but it's like rays of, like, emanation. It's like the rays of the emanation of God, basically. And Earth, I guess, is the third ray. It's a fascinating, the whole Gnostic cosmology is fascinating. So I didn't know that the Earth was one of those rays, but apparently it is. It's the third one. And it points out that the Earth in our natal chart is always 180 degrees from the natal position of the Sun. And again, I've never known my Earth's position in my natal chart. You probably haven't either, because nobody talks about those things, but I guess mine would be in Gemini. And very little attention has been paid to the astrological implication of the Earth in the natal horoscope, as I've pointed out. And Alice Bailey, some say she's very evil. I don't know enough to know, but she's at least a theosophist and an esoteric analyst. And she says, there is one aspect of energy for which the modern astrologer makes very little allowance and yet is of paramount importance. This is the energy which emanates from or radiates from the Earth itself. Astrologers have always emphasized the incoming influences and energies as they beat upon and play through our little planet, but they have omitted to take into adequate consideration the emanating qualities and forces which are the contribution of our Earth to the larger whole. Oops, good point, Alice Bailey. I agree. There's a lot that we missed. Earth apparently rules Sagittarius. I'm a Sagittarius, whoop whoop, if you're going with traditional astrology and not sidereal. And the latter points the way to the mountaintop of initiation. So Sagittarius points the way to the mountaintop of initiation. This was like a theme then that started coming up through my studies today, this mountaintop of initiation. Pretty weird thing to stumble on. I did not know that Sagittarius pointed to it, and I'm not entirely sure what it is, but the theme is there. With his bow and arrow, he points there. The Earth is in the natal chart represents the physical location of a person's path. The house position in the natal chart will reveal its location. Blah, blah, blah. So then they're just telling you how to interpret it, where it is in your chart a little bit. So the Earth's position indicates where service to humanity takes place. So your service to humanity takes place in the Earth's position in your chart. So if mine's in Gemini, my service to humanity has something to do with that idea of duality and opposition. Cool. So that's Earth. I'm glad I went down that little journey, since no one usually does. We've also got the moon. The moon is always taken into consideration in people's charts. The moon has different phases and therefore many symbols, but the most common is the crescent moon. And of course, there's no panda in the real symbol, but there's a panda in this one because I liked it better than the other ones. So there's your panda symbol. So if you're looking at the astrological symbol, it's just this crescent without a panda. But come on, let's admit the panda makes it better. That's a symbol for the moon. There's actually, apparently, that symbol is the one generally used just for the moon, but if you get into some more detailed writings and in tomes, you may find various symbols for the moon. If it's just an empty circle, like I was pointing out with Mercury, that empty circle without a dot in the middle and without anything else inside of it is the full moon. A fully black circle would be the new moon, and the opposing circle crescent to the one you're seeing right now would be the last quarter moon. This would be the first quarter moon. But if you're just looking at something basic, the moon is just going to be this crescent. And that crescent can represent so many things. A lot of times it represents this sort of veil of illusion, which is interesting given what the moon represents. And so sometimes we see people standing on top of it, and that represents that they have sort of transversed the veil of illusion and seen past it and understand all now. And sometimes we see it above their heads, and that might mean that they have come from the other side of that veil to us, and it might mean that they carry illusion sort of with them, maybe as a tool, who knows. And it might mean something else entirely. But there are those things to take into consideration. The moon, our resource tells us, is dim, it's uncertain. We have this crab that's often, this is actually going into the tarot card for the moon, but it was more interesting. And so the crab that is in it actually represents the sort of taking of what is like dead and like the detritus and sort of using it and getting rid of it, which is interesting. We've got the moon having an outline of a woman in it in many of these representations, which of course the moon is feminine, we know, and that's because it's a passive sort of, it like takes the sun rays and just passively reflects it back. It doesn't create its own, so we're told that is a feminine sort of way of being, just like holding the void and letting the energy come in and using that to create. We've got water floating in the air in the traditional card of the moon, as if attracted by the moon, which we know that is supposedly what is happening with the tides and with people who are going crazy when the moon is full. Their waters are being rushed to their head or whatever. It has the strength, but also the dangers of the world of appearances and the imagination. I like this aspect of the moon. I like it especially because the moon in reality is such an enigma, and what we're told about it doesn't really seem to super match up to our experiences of it. And so that danger of the world of appearances, like it looks like it's a rock floating in space that's been pockmarked by billions of fucking asteroids and whatever, but like who knows what the fuck it actually is. There's a lot of very strange things about the moon, so that makes sense that these qualities would be associated with the moon. Again, that crab is devouring what is transitory. I like that interpretation of the moon. It's like taking anything that's transitory and just getting rid of it and like leaving you with all that's left is what is sort of eternally true. That is a cool aspect. That's a cool way to think about the transitory aspects of the moon. And therefore it contributes to moral and physical regeneration. Never thought of the moon as contributing to moral and physical regeneration. But that would make sense if it's devouring what doesn't belong to you, what is detritus and what should be left behind. It describes how the approach to the domain of the moon is beset by very real dangers, the perils of the soul. We might describe this as the dark night of the soul. If you're heading towards the sort of power of the moon, then you're going to be beset with sort of all sorts of illusion and appearances that are misleading. And that is something that can be a huge trap for us, especially on that level of that sort of psychic, subconscious level of paths that we might travel as a soul. And so it points out that this is the route followed by shamans or other spiritual practitioners, that aren't called shamans but are basically the same thing, on their journeys, on their way to becoming people who can sort of pierce the veil and grab what's in the sort of subconscious and grab what's behind the false appearances and bring it back to be used effectively on Earth. It says that it gives instruction upon the lunar way of intuition, imagination, and magic. So you have to use your intuition, imagination, and magic to travel this path past appearances and illusions. You can't use logos to do it, which is interesting. Of course, it's a very feminine sign, so how could you? It's pregnant with negative and fatal significance, but that's, again, only if you kind of can't use your intuition, imagination, and magic, if you can't see past the illusion, if you can only take appearances and logic and not get past that. That's when it's dangerous. Otherwise, it's not. But those are the sort of negative aspects of it. If you stumble or if you're misusing this energy, it can lead to error, arbitrary fantasy, imaginative sensitivity, and more. So the moon is one of the most powerful symbols I feel like we have. And it's right up there every night. It was a full moon this morning, actually, at 4 a.m. where I'm at. So happy full moon to you all. Good time to start things. The only celestial body that doesn't rotate. Dude, what's weird is that, we supposedly have the man on the moon. Down in Australia, they have the rabbit in the moon. You know, that shows that, like, the orientation of the moon is pretty much stable. It's like, whatever. But I have this app that shows it, and I've also seen it in the sky where it'll fucking, like, rotate almost all the way around to be the rabbit in the moon. I swear to God, it didn't do that up until, like, I don't know. I swear to God, it didn't do it when I was a kid or when I was a young adult. But now it does it. Now it, like, wobbles all over the place. So it doesn't rotate. I know what you mean. But it seems to, like, spin or something now. And I swear to God, that's new. Maybe it's not. I bring it up. No one ever knows what the fuck I'm talking about. Even if I show them pictures, they still seem, like, confused about what I'm trying to say. And so I've never been able to get any information about it. But it'd be cool if anyone out there knows why that's happening. I would love to know the explanation. And I would also love to know if it is new or not. Of course, that would be much harder to find out. But yes, so the moon, down to our basic normie take on it. Again, I don't mean to say that. I need to find a better way to describe it. I'm not trying to diminish it. This is perfectly good. It's just, it's the distilled version. I'll just try to remember to say the distilled version. The moon in astrology is the ruler of Cancer. That makes sense. Cancer is very emotional, very subconscious, very much full of all of those qualities. That makes a lot of sense to me. The moon represents our deepest personal needs, our basic habits and reactions, and our unconscious. Where the sun acts, the moon reacts. So how do we instinctively respond, or respond out of illusion? What do we feel we need for a sense of security? Look to the moon in your natal charts for answers. The moon is associated with the mother and feminine energy, of course. Responsive, receptive, and reflective. Our spontaneous and instinctual reaction. Just as the moon circles the sun in a symbolically protective manner. The moon circles the sun? Oh, I get it, because it's with Earth. And reflects the sun's light. The moon in our chart shows how we protect ourselves as well as make ourselves feel secure, comfortable, and safe. I really think it has a lot more to do with our unconscious and subconscious motivations and reactions that are unexamined than anything else, which I guess does have a lot to do with how we, make ourselves safe by instinctively reacting to things and not thinking them through and not examining why we're acting and, just retreating to comfort. So I guess that part makes sense to me, but I would just keep that in mind. The biggest aspect of the moon is going to be traveling through illusion to find the truth hidden behind it all. It's highly illogical. Next we have Mars. This is the vision of Mars. Again, like I was saying, whether you believe that Mars is a planet floating in space or not, is it not interesting that Mars is, this angry red planet that's been like this gash here? If this is real, the entire planet would have been fucked when that was made. Like, just fucked. Look at how fucking big it is. This gash, Graham Hancock envisions that possibly the asteroid that hit this was like, made the whole planet like shift out of its orbit into another location and just, killed the entire planet. And maybe before that, Mars had life and water and all of these things that we always want to imagine Mars as having had. But that is a huge gash, and it's interesting that the sort of god of war and the planet of war would have this war wound. So again, like I was saying, if it is a created nonsense, and this is a flat plane or some other thing going on, then they're definitely like tongue-in-cheek fucking with us by being like, yeah, totally, look, see, here's the war wound. I don't know, it's interesting. The symbol for Mars, of course, is the same symbol as male. Just like Venus was female, Mars is male. It's a very masculine planet of masculine energy, so it makes sense. There's a lot of activity and raw energy going on here. Again, we'll point out that this is the full moon with what I associate with Sagittarius, because I'm Sagittarius and it's an arrow, but at least the arrow of action and masculine energy. That's interesting. Interesting symbol. If we go back to that, actually, if this is sort of like the moon combined with this male active sort of principle, then this is going away from the moon. So maybe that's emphasizing its masculinity and that it's shooting out from the feminine circle behind it. rejecting it almost, or just like showing the sort of opposition to it. That's an interesting way to look at that symbol. We've got our resource again, talking about Mars. Mars says the primitive and astrobiological conception of creation is that it can take place only through primordial sacrifice. I read this sentence like 6 times to myself. I was like, huh? I was like thinking about like, why would the conception of creation be that it can only take place through primordial sacrifice? But the best that I can kind of come to, or what I came to in order to get past the sentence and give myself some meaning, is that I guess, like, I don't know, does a sperm sacrifice itself when it gets into the egg? Like, it's basically like dying to make the baby or something? I don't know. That's all I could really think of. I was like, what sacrifices itself in order to create just naturally? It just doesn't seem, I don't know, maybe I'm totally missing something here, but if you see it, you let me know, because it doesn't seem to me that sacrifice has, I mean, I guess like women like giving birth are sacrificing a lot, parents raising kids are sacrificing something. I guess I like see that, or I guess, we're eating food to live, that's sacrificing in a way, so maybe it's just that sort of idea that like something has to die for other things to live. That I can be down with. That might be what they're talking about. Anyway, moving past the first sentence. What has been created can only be preserved through sacrifice and war. So again, I guess I'm to the point where I understand the sacrifice part, but why war? So why war? What has been created can only be preserved by war? I don't see how that's true. I don't see how it's true. I'm always trying to go back to like the basics of nature to try to figure out what people are meaning or what they're getting at, but I don't see a war that preserves what has been created, except in just like pure defense, possibly. Anyway, here's that mountain again that is a theme. It's the mountain that you traverse to get to the top of to reach enlightenment, I guess. The image of Janus, or the twin-peaked mountain of Mars, are symbols of inversion. That is, of the intercommunication between the upper, non-formed world of future potentialities and the lower world of materialized forms. This is complicated. Like, this is taking like all of the most esoteric sort of knowledge I know and applying it into one paragraph. It's thick and heavy, but it's interesting that Sagittarius was pointing the way to the mountain in the previous thing that we read, and here's Mars with a similar symbol pointing the way to what they're now describing as this mountain of inversion, or at the very least of duality, because it's talking about the upper non-formed world and the lower materialized forms. So that would be the sort of heaven and the earth. Interesting. So when they give names here, it's because they've already talked about these people in their introductions and stuff. But this principle is characteristic of the primordial order. Its rigid laws demands a death for each life. It just sounds, I don't know, it sounds like it's just like jumping. But I guess there is, like Chad says, necessary competition. War is lion against gazelle. I guess that's true, yeah. Or even like, human against the pea pod or whatever. Word. So, primordial order. Its rigid law demands a death for each life. That is basically what you're describing, Chad. So yeah, I think you nailed it. It sublimates the criminal instinct to serve good and humanitarian ends, and fuses love and hate in the interest of the renewal of life. When I was reading this, I was thinking of how we take psychopaths and purposely put them in the military in order to accomplish our military ends, or like we take psychopaths and we put them at the head of, companies as like CEOs, because they can just like make decisions without any emotion at all, just like what's actually the most logical end, and be unbarred in that, just have that straight action. And that's also very representative of the energy of Mars. So that's where I was like going with this part of it, sublimating the criminal instinct to serve good and humanitarian ends. I can totally see that, So that's an interesting aspect. It's an interesting way to look at it. But then it gives me more of an almost like psychopathic element to Mars. But I don't know. It doesn't have to be that, right? It just has to be this energy that wants to sort of get things accomplished and knows that stupid phrase, you gotta break some eggs to make an omelet. That's Mars saying that in the kitchen. The perennial incarnation of this necessity for the shedding of blood. But here again, I'm confused. It says this is apparent in all orders of the cosmos. Is it? I guess it is. It's like planets have to break apart to make little fucking asteroids that will go bring little clusters of life to some other planet that's like waiting to get impregnated by the, protozoa or whatever that are on the asteroid or whatever the fuck is going on out there. But yeah, his attributes are weapons, and especially the sword, which makes sense. The sword is that symbol of like piercing through and moving forward and that same sort of energy. So that all makes sense too. Thanks for helping me unpack that. Conflict is always needed. It is interesting. Conflict is this necessary element in process and growth and everything. It's like, otherwise we would all be uniform already and homogenous and we wouldn't even experience anything. But back to the distilled view. Mars, the god of war, is the ruler of Aries. That makes sense to me. I'm learning Aries is a very, fiery, passionate, warlike motion and energy. In astrology, Mars is the planet of energy, action, and desire. It is the survival instinct and can be thought of as the leftover animal nature of man. Makes sense? Mars rules our animal instincts and aggression, anger, and survival. Our sexual desires come under the rule of Mars. Makes sense too. It's that sort of base, not even base, just, basic necessary action of life and creation. Whereas Venus rules romantic attraction, Mars is most associated with basic body attraction. This is the planet of action rather than reaction. I wonder if most Aries are like good looking and take care of their bodies. That'd be interesting to know. There's no contemplation before action. The drive associated with Mars differs from that of the Sun, and that is self-assertion rather than the assertion of the will. It is raw energy rather than creative energy. So it can be undirected and chaotic, I'm sure. It's the push that gets us out of bed in the morning, our drive, our desire, our nature, and our active energy. When we're acting out our Mars, we're assertive, directed, and forthright, and adventurous. On the negative side, we can be impulsive, rash, impatient, aggressive, and forceful. I am none of those things, ever. Just joking. I'm often those things. And next we have Jupiter. This is, again, a funny picture of Jupiter. If you're thinking of, hiding the lies in this photograph, which we already know is a made-up digital image. It's art. But it's interesting that they decided to add this crown to Jupiter. There's this glowing blue crown that Jupiter has now. Jupiter is the king, so there we go. Jupiter has been crowned. I even see a silly face here. There's an eye where my mouse is here. If you can see it, there's an eye there, and then there's the mouth over here, and he's making a funny face with his crown. This is the symbol for Jupiter. It is the most fun one that I could find. I like this symbol, but it is so weird. It looks to me like all at once, it looks like an H, a 21, a 24, and a 4. Really, it's just a very strange symbol, but it is kind of most like a 4 if you want to remember it quite easily. I think that is the easiest way to remember it. However, 4 does not connect to Jupiter in any way for me, so it's not helpful. I have no mnemonic yet for this symbol, and I have no interpretation of it. I don't understand the shapes and why they are what they are, but the next image I found is interesting. Oh, wait. Hold up. This image is interesting, because I saw it, and it helped me be like, oh, maybe this is where the symbol came from, and then now I can understand it better and remember it better. The prescription thing is just its own weird thing, but it is interesting to look at the Eye of Horus and notice there is some similarity in the shape, especially if you were to turn this a little bit and have the Eye of Horus be sort of upside down almost. They do look kind of similar, and then you can look at the symbol for prescription and see that it's connected too. Why would those symbols be connected? I did not have time to go searching to figure that out, but I thought I'd throw it out there for you guys because it clicked something in my brain that made it make a little bit more sense to me. Yeah, it does. It looks like the reverse a little bit. Horus. So anyway, Jupiter, our resource tells us, among the Greco-Roman gods, he corresponds to the supreme virtues of the judgment and the will. As the lord of the sky, his infernal counterparts are Pluto, because that's the underworld dude. the lord of the Chthonian world, or the underworld, and Neptune as lord of the deep, symbolizing the unconscious. So he's up in the sky. He's all about that fast-moving, ascended sort of energy, that crowned king energy. And this is so short, though. It's like for all of history, all of mythology, all the representation you could go into, and for some reason they leave it at this. I'm just so confused how they sometimes go on at great length, and other times they have just this. I'm like, did they forget to finish? I don't know. But his attributes are the thunderbolt, the crown, the eagle, and the throne. It's interesting to note that all throughout our history, these things have been associated with our monarchs and rulers and or our countries. So they're definitely not foreign to these understandings. But it's just such a short little, oops, oh, I spoiled it. Such a short little look into it. So the best I could do with the time that I had was to just go down to the distilled version. So we have Jupiter, king of the gods, ruler of Sagittarius. Woo-hoo. In astrology, Jupiter is a planet of plenty. It's abundance. It's tolerant. It's expansive. It reaches out over everything, which again, you can kind of understand with kingship and countries are expansive and abundant, and hopefully benevolent in its rule, sort of. But it's less the ruler of stricture and more the ruler of like guidance and support and abundance. Some of this planet's keywords include morality, gratitude, hope, honor, and the law. It's also like most just things that you might associate with a king, which is really cool. It's a planet of broader purpose, reach, and possibility, so it's often going to have to do with interacting with a broad range, casting a wide net. Jupiter has generally been associated with good luck and bounty. Optimism and growth, including mental and spiritual growth, come under its rule. On the upside, Jupiter is associated with a sense of humor, goodwill, and mercy. The more negative manifestations of Jupiter include blind optimism, excess, and overindulgence. So if we think of bad kings, we might think of some of those things. They're much worse, honestly. If those are the worst of it, that's a great king. Irresponsibility that results from blind optimism, not ill will, can be displayed. Oops. In the chart, the position of Jupiter by sign reveals how we express our generosity and tolerance. It shows how we go about trusting others and improving our lives. I also think what they didn't say here is that it has a lot to do with leadership and sort of how we look to affect the world in what we do. I think that also has to do with Jupiter, in my understanding. Then we have Saturn, and since Saturn has so many negative connotations, I liked this picture with the cat on it. We're gonna just, like, if there's anything bad about Saturn, it's gonna be squashed by this cat. It's all good. Saturn has a bad rap, I think. Clearly, the Saturn symbolism and energy has been used and very likely abused in our world, but that doesn't mean that the energy of Saturn is in itself all bad. So let's just remember this cat's got it under control, and we're going to roll forward. It is interesting that, again, we have Saturn represented. It is an artistic representation, but if it is just an artistic representation and not an artistic representation of an actual body floating around in the vacuum of space, it is interesting that we have given it rings, because rings are and can be symbolic of binding and controlling, which again is part of the energy of Saturn. So again, it's like if it is all a bunch of bullshit, they definitely hid their truth in their lies. This is the symbol for Saturn. Again, I'm confused by it. What I see in it is like a shepherd's crook, which I guess does make sense to me. And then I see the cross, but it's not a balanced cross. In fact, it's a very unbalanced cross. If anything, it looks more like a, what is that, like a square? Which by which I mean a tool, a square. I think that's what it's called. Or like a slide rule, maybe. You know what I'm talking about, though? There's like a tool, like a mathematical or geometry-related tool that looks like that. Which then that kind of makes sense, too. So if I look at it that way, see if I just talk shit out in disco, then I understand things better. So we've got the sorry, I lost my train of thought. Oh, if this is that tool, then that makes sense. It's all about like measurement and order and keeping things whatever. And the shepherd's crook, if that's what this is, it's all about sort of, you know, keeping everything in line and like a strict father moving things along. So I get it now. It's helping me understand the symbol. That is the symbol for Saturn. Looks like an H with a T, but you can also think of it as that square and crook. Yeah, like a right angle. So to our resource about the symbolism of Saturn, we've got Saturn symbolizes time, which with its ravenous appetite for life devours all its creations, whether they are beings, things, ideas, or sentiments. He is also symbolic of the insufficiency in the mystic sense of any order of existence within the plane of the temporal, or the necessity for the reign of Chronos to be succeeded by another cosmic mode of existence in which time has no place. When I read that, I think of Saturn as a pretty cool dude. Because think about how true it is that time literally kills everything, and that it's a therefore like mediocre way of doing things. It's losing my words. It's not as good. There's better ways of doing it. This is insufficient to be secure in time. There's better ways of being, perhaps, than living through linear time. And so, you know, we have the myth of Saturn where he eats all his kids, but it makes sense if what you're trying to do is, or no, you're not even trying to do anything. That just is what time does to all of its kids. It eats them all. We all die. We all come to existence, and then we die because we live enough time. But it also makes sense then that he would want to replace the temporal with something more universally true. But there's always that duality, because the only reason we get to experience life and love and all the things involved in it is because we are here in time. Anyway, time brings restlessness, the sense of duration lasting from the moment of stimulus up to the instant of satisfaction. Hence, Saturn is a symbolic of activity, of slow and implacable dynamism, of realization and communication. And this is why he is said to have devoured his children, and why he is related to the Ouroboros, which is that snake eating its own tail, or the symbol for eternity. He's eating them all to create a timeless infinity. That's not a bad goal, dude. I'm okay with you, Saturn. Other attributes of his are the oar, standing for navigation and progress through things temporal. The hourglass, obviously representing the temporal, and the scythe. So, is this a scythe? Is that what they're actually called? Oh, it is a scythe. Okay, word. Now we're getting in closer. The scythes for the culling. The gathering and the culling. Interesting. In the scythe, what do they say about the scythe? In the scythe, we can detect a double meaning. First, its function of cutting, parallel to and corroborating the symbolism of devouring. And secondly, its curved shape, which invariably corresponds to the feminine principle. This is why the alchemist masters as the spiritual science of symbolism named Saturn Mercurius Senex. Senex means old. Old Mercury. Given the androgynous character of gender and sex, and is related to, I skipped something. Given the androgynous character of Mercury, Saturn takes on the same characteristics, ambiguity of gender and sex, and is related to the earth, the sarcophagus, and putrefaction, as well as to the color black. Yikes. It all sounds really bad, but I can understand the frustration with time as an inefficient method of being, and as something that is inevitably always killing everything. But I like that the Ouroboros is in there, that infinite level of things, the eternal, is the ideal, I think. But I did not think of the science as a feminine aspect. I know that whole part about it being an old Mercury and being androgynous is very interesting. That could be a whole digging session and a whole episode on itself. I'm betting the similarities between Mercury and Saturn and why they would be related or connected at all. And why does Saturn have to do with the Earth? I could not imagine. I guess my best guess is that humans were part of the beings that experienced time, temporal progress. It does make sense why the sarcophagus and putrefaction and the color black, just because that is the inevitable aspect of time. Everything dies. So, The echo is back. Jesus. Fuck. It's so annoying. High five, Arts Liberal. It's nice to see you. Let me try to fix it again. This is my way of trying to fix it. Might help. Let me check the audio again. Hopefully you can hear me. Perhaps the echo is gone. That demon is right. Be gone. Not allowed here. Hopefully it's better. Oh, good. I shouldn't have to do that 3 times every show, but apparently that's what I have to do. So whoever they mentioned suggests that Saturn is in every case a symbol of the law of limitation, which gives shape to life, or the localized expression in time and space of the universal life. I like that some people point out that without Saturn's sort of strictures and, you know, form, like focus on time and progress and how you get things done and whatever, that you would not have any sort of pleasure or positive experiences either, because you would never sort of work within your limitations to do that. So I'm glad they pointed that out. Those are some of the positive aspects of Saturn. You sort of like build up what you can when you can, knowing that everything will die eventually, so that you can appreciate things when you can appreciate them. Here's this image of Saturn, which is very interesting. Again, he's got the scythe. He's very focused on death. I mean, like, he's a killer, I guess. He reminds you that you've got only so much time. We do see these 2 dragon-y, serpent-y creatures sitting up there with him. They almost kind of have a phoenix attribute to them, so maybe that's the hint at the Ouroboros or the rebirth. And I forget which this is Capricorn, right? The goat fish, and then Aquarius here. So those must be the planets that Saturn is associated, or sorry, the signs that Saturn is associated with. But I like that little picture from 1485. I'll just have you know that what I just did for the audio is exactly what I did earlier in the show for the audio, and it didn't work that time, it worked this time. So again, there's no explaining any of it. Back to the distillate. We've got Saturn as the ruler of Capricorn. Oh, we got it. That was in the image. In Greek mythology, Cronus was one of the Titans and the father of Zeus. Cronus ate his children to prevent himself from being dethroned as the king of the gods. So here's where it gets less about trying to free people from the strictures of time, or trying to like help people prepare for the strictures of time, and more about selfishness and evil. So I get why Saturn has a bad rap. It's not only that, but it's how it's used by the elites and whatever. But anyway, that is until his wife Rhea tricked him into swallowing a stone when Zeus was born. In astrology, Saturn is associated with restriction and limitation, where Jupiter expands, Saturn constricts. Although the themes of Saturn seem depressing, Saturn brings structure and meaning to our world. Saturn knows the limits of time and matter. Saturn reminds us of our boundaries, our responsibilities, and our commitments. It brings definition to our lives. Saturn makes us aware of the need for self-control and of boundaries and our limits. So those are all things that I appreciate. I like those things. We do need sort of our archetypes in those areas, and so that's a good thing. It's often associated with our fathers or father figures. In childhood, discipline, rules, and regulations imposed on us by authority figures from parents and teachers and the like were not always pleasant, but they actually helped us to understand the world around us. Similarly, Saturn's lessons actually help us to grow. And obviously the negative aspects of that would be overbearing, over-controlling, nitpicking, and just sort of like stuck in the limitations and never looking at the expansive possibilities. So that all makes sense. Saturn makes a lot of sense to me. Next we have Chiron. This is Chiron. This is not a heavenly body though. This is a mythological figure who is a centaur, half man, half horse. His name is Chiron. Now we have this asteroid in our solar system named after him, also named Chiron. Chiron is Chiron. I don't know if people say it differently. It's one of those things I've only read and never heard. I say Chiron. Who knows if that's how it's pronounced. It's Supporting the teacher means stopping them in error as soon as possible. Exactly. My students did that. I loved it. It's like, thank you for correcting me. I learned something out of that every time. Thank you, Chad. This is the symbol for Chiron. I saw this in a vision, again, before I ever saw it in real life. And so coming to understand Chiron has been very important for me because of that. It looks to me like a key. I believe it's probably meant to look like a key. I believe that it might be a K for Chiron because in Latin, if there was a hard C sound, I think it would have been a K, right? Yeah. Now I'm tripping. I'm learning Latin right now too, so I'm trying to remember if I've even seen a K at all. Maybe I haven't. Maybe I'm totally wrong about that. Maybe it's not a K. Maybe it is meant to look like a key. That's what it looks like to me. We again have the circle, which usually is like the mood and that subconscious, unconscious energy. And in this case, I think it is that as part of this symbol. I think that that's part of the representation. And maybe it's that the key is piercing into that circle and that is the key. As you learn about Chiron, if you've never heard about it, that might make more sense to you about why that symbol might look like that. My book, again, didn't have Chiron. It was very disappointing, so I went to find the best thing that I could find online, which is not usually very good, to be honest, but I did find this, and it is pretty good. It just tells us a little bit about Chiron, the figure, who's the most important centaur in Greek mythology, famous for teaching ability, the son of blah blah titans, upper body of a man, lower body of a horse. His front legs were also human, which is very weird for having a horse body with human feet. Like, it's just different, but it showed that he was higher in class, better than the rest of the centaurs, I guess. Other differences between Chiron and his brethren were that he was far more civilized, not indulging in drinking and being overcome with lust. So a lot of centaurs were associated with just sort of wild, like, drinking and lustfulness and partying and all of that. And he was better than that because he was, I guess, from the gods, or the Titans. He lived on Mount Pelion, which is where a lot of the Titans and gods lived. He studied all the myths. His students included famous heroes and gods of the myths, such as Asclepius, I don't say his name right, I know it, Ajax, Achilles, Theseus, Jason, Peleus, Perseus, and even Heracles and Phoenix. So he tutored all of them. So he's kind of like a big deal in that way. Very wise and just. His death was the result of events that started when Heracles visited the centaur Pholus in his cave while trying to complete the fourth task described in Labors of Heracles. The two individuals had supper and Heracles asked for wine. Pholus opened a bottle of wine, sacred wine given to him by Dionysus, but the smell attracted the other centaurs from the nearby area, and we all know that centaurs are going to party and get wild and crazy. So the centaurs attacked in an effort to take the wine, but Heracles killed many of them using poisoned arrows. One of those arrows hit Chiron by mistake. Chiron was immortal and could not die, but the poison caused unbearable pain to him, so he happily gave up his immortality in exchange for Prometheus's freedom, when he was asked to do so by Heracles. Chiron then took a space on Mount Olympus along with the gods. So he sacrificed himself to free Prometheus. Prometheus, of course, is the archetypal sort of Luciferian light bearer that trying to bring light and fire to humanity that was prohibited to them by God, and therefore free them from their enslavement, if you look at it that way. If you look at it in other ways, it might be that he gave humans technology that was beyond their ability to comprehend and therefore corrupted them. But that, you can look at it either way. But so he freed Prometheus through his sacrifice. That's what Chiron did. So he's sacrificing, he's wise, he's a teacher. Even though my little text didn't have Chiron, it did have centaur, so I thought I'd take a look at that and see what centaurs represent. A fabulous being, half man, half horse, supposed by some to be the fruit of the union of Centaurus and the Magnesian mares, so horse and whatever Centaurus is. From a symbolic point of view, the centaur is the antithesis of the knight. So if you think about what a knight would represent, like order and serving and, keeping law and justice and all of this, it represents the complete domination of a being by the baser forces. In other words, it denotes cosmic force, the instincts, or the unconscious, uncontrolled by the spirit. It sounds a little bit like, you know, if you look at it one way, you're just sort of like getting into your wild roots and like letting your mind go and the logos go for a minute. And you're just letting your unconscious just sort of like romp around, and you're just kind of freeing it for the moment. It sounds, on another way of looking at it, might be that it's almost like a sort of demonic possession or entity possession, especially when you think about what being uncontrolled by the spirit might mean. So it's interesting that Centaur is sort of associated with that freeing of what's his face, Prometheus, and also this idea of letting go of logos and the higher order of things, and sort of letting this base instincts take over, uncontrolled by spirit. Very interesting. What's up? I see Sencha T in the chat. Nice to see you, Sencha. Chad is full of exuberance. Thank you, Chad. Yes. So Chiron, this is the distillate again. Let me see the distillate. What's interesting in this, if you see this upper symbol, it's kind of probably small for you, but there are 4 corners denoted on this circle, making me think that it might almost be like a fusion of Earth and the Moon, but interesting. And then the K is a little bit more pronounced in this one. But Chiron is a comet with a unique and erratic orbit. In the natal chart, Chiron is symbolized by the wounded healer. So this wounded healer is the central aspect of Chiron that you would want to try to remember if you are trying to remember things. Being the wounded healer, if you think about it, he was like shot by that arrow, and that was caused him unbearable pain, and he couldn't heal it, even though he's known as a healer, which is interesting. He couldn't use his own skills to save himself, but he could use that moment to sacrifice and heal someone else, which was Prometheus. So it's like using your own wounds to hopefully heal yourself, but at least if not that, barring that, healing someone else instead. It represents our deepest wound and our effort to heal the wound. Chiron was named after the centaur in Greek mythology, who was the healer and teacher, who ironically could not heal himself. Look at that. I just said it. Chiron in our natal charts points to where we have healing powers as the result of our own deep spiritual wounds. We may overcompensate in these areas of life. Chiron, as a wounded healer, first must face issues of low self-worth and feelings of inadequacy and learn to rise above these issues. Because the wound goes deep and we may work hard to overcome the wound, healing powers are potent. It's interesting. My Chiron, I can't remember exactly where it's at, but wherever it's at, it indicates that that my deepest wound comes from not being seen clearly, which is absolutely true. That causes me more pain than most things in the world when people can't see me, and almost no one can. And you may think you can, but I bet you can't. Most people misinterpret much of what I do and say. Even if they understand me for a while, they come up against something eventually which makes them feel like they don't understand me at all, and then they look at me in a totally different way. It's just very interesting, this dynamic I have, and when I looked at Chiron where it was in my chart, that's exactly what it showed, was that is the thing that hurts me the most. So it makes sense to me that I have become someone who, one of my superpowers is that I see people very, very, very clearly, and then I recognize them and sort of vindicate them in that way, and support that and reinforce it. And people like that. It's great. It's a healing thing that I have. It's a part of what made me a good teacher, and probably part of why whoever you are listening right now, probably part of what you like too. So you could look at your own Chiron in your chart and see what it says, or you could just think in your life, what is the thing that hurts you the most, or what is the thing that you've come up against over and over again in personal, interpersonal, or intrapersonal, or societal relationships that causes you the most pain, and see how you have used that to turn it into a gift that you offer the world. And if you haven't yet turned it into the gift, then Chiron is asking you to use that key and unlock that box and give that gift to the world. That is your greatest gift, is your greatest battle. That is the treasure that you got from the cave on your hero's journey. That is what it is. It's the thing that you learned to overcome for yourself, and then you bring it back when you come out of the cave and go back to your little village, and you give it to everyone. So Chiron sort of represents that part of the hero's journey, which I think is cool. Chiron's one of my faves. Oh, thank you for seeing me, Billy Joan. The join button is a new thing, 5 Arts Liberalis. I do have YouTube is letting me do like a subscription thing. However, I much prefer that you do Subscribe Star, because it's a lot more clear how much money you give, how much money I get, how much they take. YouTube is very unclear. I'm totally down for anybody to subscribe on YouTube. I just don't trust YouTube myself, and I don't want to give them money. So I'd prefer Subscribestar. If you want to go to subscribestar.com/rogue-ways or search for Rogue Ways on Subscribestar to get that. But yeah, that is new. Good eye. Next, we're on to Uranus. I mean, look at Uranus. I mean, like, I don't know, man. Some of these, just I look at them and I'm like, you think that's really how it looks? Like, it's just a ball of, like, I don't know, Technicolor, like, marbled dream clouds. It's just interesting. And I guess it has rings now. Maybe it always did. I don't remember Uranus having rings, but maybe I'm forgetting my childhood. I don't really know. But that's Uranus as rendered by NASA, whatever that means. This is Uranus's symbol. It's one of the few symbols where I found, at least where I was looking, a breakdown of what the symbol itself means, which is often what I'm looking for, like why this shape facing that way and why this line, and those types of things interest me. So, but it's boring and stupid because part of the reason why it has this H is because of the person who discovered it. Their name started with an H, and I just think that's so selfish and stupid. So I hate the symbol of Uranus for that reason. Otherwise, it's like the feminine symbol, but then it has these two bars on either side of it. And another thing I glanced at really quickly just said that, like, one of these, brackets or whatever is, like, representing the soul, and the other bracket is representing the body. But then I don't know, with this, like, feminine symbol then represent the mind? Like, that doesn't really make sense. So, I don't know. The symbol for Uranus is the one that I struggle with the most so far. But there it is. Maybe more meaning will pop out at me sometime when I'm studying Uranus deeper. I don't know. But here we go. I also didn't have Uranus in my book. It actually gave a reason why, at least. It said Uranus and Neptune are not included in the original accounting of the planets or whatnot, so the Theosophists, I guess, don't talk about it. But I did find this pretty cool resource that did have Uranus on a sort of academic level. So here we go. The Uranian process began with something like a sudden burst of anger on the part of chaos, primordial fire, as it were, catching fight. The god of the oceans was confronted by the sky god. Uranus is patron of whatever raises mankind from the ground and lifts him skywards to his mythological domain in the upward surge of effort to attain the absolute. This would include such mundane things as skyscrapers and going via aircraft and space satellites to interplanetary rockets. The Uranian encompasses the men of Prometheus's breed, true thieves of the celestial fire, instinctively motivated to deeds of daring. I can sort of relate this to my idea of sort of making the best of myself as I could and sneaking my rebel ass into the school system to become a teacher. That's how I sort of personalize this for myself. But I guess that just urging towards the highest you could sort of imagine and bursting out towards that to sort of reach as high as you can. I just thought of like Icarus maybe flying towards the sun or something. But also there's something in there of that sort of doing it for the betterment of others, right? Raising mankind from the ground, lifting them skywards. There's always a record to be broken, further or faster to go than anyone else before. Intoxicated by the thirst for unlimited power, the Uranian is the progressive individual on the track of a new age, and prone to suffer the fate of the sorcerer's apprentice. At the heart of this process emerges the archetype of hyper-individuation, which provides the specification for a super-personalized and original human being, generally in the throes of egomania, with the most explosive of unities for a goal and bent upon the absolute. The egomania part doesn't sound great to me, but I guess if you're striving towards greatness and sort of rebelling against everything that is known to reach like new heights, maybe there is a bit of egomania in that no matter what's going on. I understand this hyper-individuation and super-personalized aspect of it really well, because I'm thinking like when you're going beyond everything that's been done before, it's going to be because you really do understand yourself and as an individual hyperwell, and you've sort of differentiated yourself from everything else already. Not that that makes you different or special, but I just kind of understand that process of doing that to like go beyond. So that makes sense to me too. The sky god in Hesiod's theogony is the symbol of boundless, undifferentiated, creative abundance, which smothers what it begets through its very proliferation. It characterizes the initial phase of any activity with its alternations of elation and depression, the ebb and flow, life and death of the project. Thus, Uranus comes to symbolize the cycle of evolution. The bull is the emblem of the sky god of Indo-Mediterranean religion, who is one of many fertility symbols. So, that boundless, undifferentiated creative abundance, which smothers what it begets through its very proliferation. And that's, I guess, what would birth that hyper-individuation and hyper-personalization, is trying to get out from under that undifferentiated creative abundance. But with Uranus, this fecundity is dangerous. As Mazon notes in his commentary on Hesiod's theogony, the mutilation of Uranos, I guess that's Uranus, puts an end to his hateful and unproductive fecundity and introduces into the world through the appearance of Aphrodite an order, a fixedness of species which was to prevent all disordered and dangerous procreation in the future. I don't get any of that part. That just went way over my head. It's hateful and unproductive fecundity. How is it unproductive if it's like creative abundance? I guess because it's undifferentiated. And so then he created the feminine aspect in order to create out of that creative, abundant energy something with form. I guess that makes sense. On the basis of Greek mythology, Andre blah 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 characterizes the three essential phases of creative development. Oh, I cut that part off. How sad. Chaotic. Oh, that's because I only wanted this line. Uranus is the first phase, chaotic and undifferentiated effervescence. So that would make sense to me why too much creative, undifferentiated effervescence would just be like floating in a blissful tank for eternity, but at some point you have to like make something out of it, so you have to like rebel against it and aim, outside of it in order to create something new that fits with the theme of the rest of what we read. So that's Uranus. Uranus is a very interesting energy then. It's like rejecting because rejecting is creative. Uranus. Yeah, I do pronounce Uranus right. The god of the sky and the heavens is the ruler of Aquarius. And Aquarius is the water bearer. Interesting. You can see this other version of the symbol up here if you look too, where it's curved instead of more of that squarish bracket, but it still has, otherwise the same shape. Which again, I just don't like. I just don't understand what it's even supposed to be. I don't know. I'll have to think more on it. If anybody has any ideas of how to interpret the actual shapes and parts of this, maybe when I get back to that part I just discovered in this book before we started of all the aspects of basic geometry and shapes and what they mean, maybe then I'll be able to get a better hang of Uranus. But anyway, so ruler of Aquarius is where we were. In astrology, the energies of Uranus are electric and crammed with change. Sounds like me. Uranus is forward-looking. It balks at tradition and celebrates originality and individuality. That also sounds like me. Uranus is associated with technology, innovation, discovery, and all that is progressive. If by progressive they actually just mean creative and moving forward, then that's cool. On the upside, Uranus is associated with enlightenment, progressiveness, objectivity, novelty, and ingenuity. Negative expression of Uranus is rebelliousness without a cause and irresponsibility. That makes perfect sense, given what we learned. Wanting to rebel from what is because it is too constricting and we need to reach a higher phase makes sense, but to do it without purpose and just to do it is pointless. When Uranus is not developed, it reacts. But when natives are truly in tune with its energies, Uranus is highly intuitive. It represents a spark of intuition that spurs invention. You can see Uranus as the intuition that sparks further studies or investigation. So Uranus moves very slowly, so it will be shared with other people in the same generation. Interesting. So every one of your same age will have Uranus in the same spot. By house, the position of Uranus shows where individuals look to stir things up. I love it. See, now after this, I feel like I need to go return to my natal chart and re-understand all of it. That was Uranus, the desire to rebel against and move beyond for positive creation and individuation. Now we've got Neptune. Here's Neptune. It's just a blue smear of paint. That's Neptune. I don't know, I have like nothing to say about this image. It's boring. That's what they created. This is Neptune's symbol. I think this is from like a video game or something, but it's a cool way of doing the symbol because it is a feminine symbol. There's a woman on there, and I like that it says Soldier of Deep Waters because Neptune is the sort of deep water. You know, it's Neptune with the trident and the god of the sea, and so we've got the trident up here with this cross below. So that is a cool symbol. I like Neptune's symbol. It makes sense. Neptune did have an entry, and it didn't make sense though because it said the reason why Uranus wasn't in there. Whatever. That book. That made me mad now. Anyway, Neptune in primitive thought, he was the deity of heaven. Oh yeah, this was interesting. So he was the deity of heaven and the deity of heaven, and therefore of the upper waters. So when we think about the heavens being a sort of watery place, which is referred to in many texts, which is very interesting, and some people think that's what's beyond the firmament if we do have a hard, fast barrier, that what's above there is like water, or literally water. So he was the deity of that upper water. But then it says that is the god of cloud and rain, which, okay, sure, let's throw that in there too. That's an upper water. Later he became the god of fresh and fertilizing water. And that makes me think of pregnancy and bringing down to like a human level almost, right? And finally, he was seen as the god of the sea. And that's like the subterranean level. So we have another trinity here, this time for Neptune. We have the upper, the earthly level, and the lower. The heavens, the earthly, and the subterranean, or whatever. In this development, we can trace not only a chronological and historical line of progress, but more especially a spiritual projection of the myth of the fall. So whether we're talking about the fall of the angels or the fall of mankind, it could be both, right? Which finally became absorbed into the character of Neptune. So Neptune represents that fall from heaven down to all the way down to the underworld. The trident, from this point of view of descent or the fall, can be equated with the thunderbolt, just like Lucifer fell from heaven in the thunderbolt. This is interesting too because the trident, I'm realizing, represents that trinity, interessante. But I would otherwise never equate a thunderbolt with a trident, but there it is anyway. On the other hand, the trident is identified with magic, like a magic wand used in water binding. That's interesting too. For the alchemist, Neptune was quite simply a symbol for water. Apart from the trident, his attributes are seahorses, signifying the cosmic forces and the swelling rhythm of the foamy waves. I think that's a silly cop-out. I think the seahorse represents the cosmic forces brought down into the sort of physical, but whatever. The discovery of psychoanalysts that the ocean is a symbol of the unconscious has at the same time proved beyond question the relationship of Neptune with the deepest layers of the individual and the universal soul. Therefore, we can conclude Neptune, like Pluto, symbolizes the negative aspect of the spirit, king of the deeps of the subconscious and the turbulent waters of life. It is he who unleashes storms, representing the passions of the soul, particularly in his extreme role as the destroyer. Regarding the trident as an emblem of the threefold sin arising from the corruption of the three vital impulses of the spirit, which are conservation, reproduction, and evolution, adding that the trident is also an attribute of Satan. We do see Satan with his little trident often, which is interesting. Neptune, if he's the god of the sort of underworld, or not the underworld, but like the subconscious, that sort of underworld, then that is interesting that they share that symbol. But it's more interesting that trident then also still represents that trinity of heaven, earth, and the below, the deep layers. I don't think it's bad to be in touch with the deepest layers, the unconscious, especially at like a universal and soul level. So I think that would be a good energy to take from Neptune. And I don't know why you would look at it as a sin to conserve, reproduce, or evolve. That's very interesting. I guess when you're looking at it from a Gnostic point of view, it is a sin, because you are supposed to use your vital waters for something higher than mere reproduction and conservation of the species. So I guess we're coming at it from that angle in this text. This is the distillation. We've got Neptune, god of the sea, is the ruler of Pisces. Makes sense. Pisces is a watery, fishy sign. In astrology, Neptune is considered a planet of inspiration, dreams, psychic receptivity, illusion, and confusion. That makes sense given all the subconscious symbolism in here. Rules spirituality and all things subtle. Makes sense. A youthful and sometimes naive spirit characterizes those with a strong placement of Neptune in their natal charts. I would not put it that way. I would say that, I mean, I get what they're saying, but I think what they're really saying is just that the people who have that strong influence are more going to go with their intuition and emotion rather than logic, and our whole world is like dominated by logic to a heavy extent, and so it would seem naive and youthful to like not go along with that all the time. So I think that's like a little bit of a misinterpretation, but I understand where it comes from. On the upside, Neptune is associated with intuition and spiritual enlightenment, as well as the planet of mercy and compassion. The more negative manifestations of Neptune include deception, trickery, deceit, guilt, and addiction. Makes sense. If you don't have your subconscious straightened out, those are all the things you would fall into. In the chart, the position of Neptune by sign will be shared with other people of the same generation due to Neptune's slow movement. Also slow, also on that outer edge of our solar system, so that makes sense too. It's a generational influence. I didn't really think of that before today, that those two move so slowly that everyone in your generation would have the same. The qualities of Neptune's sign are those we might envision in an ideal world. Okay, so that's Neptune. Now we've got Pluto. Pluto that was a planet, wasn't a planet, was a planet again. Pluto that again looks like they just took sort of like the moon and moved some things around and then colored it a little. Whatever. They're just playing with Photoshop. There's Pluto. That's a real big crater. I guess if you're out at the edge of the solar system, if that's how things go, then you would have the biggest crater marks, perhaps. Pluto's symbol is thus, it's like Neptune, but with a circle instead of that middle spire of the trident. So that's interesting. Again, it must have a feminine aspect. It's got this, I mean, it might, I shouldn't say must, it might not, but that's what I assume when I see this sort of shape. It's weird because this would be like a full moon symbol above a quarter moon symbol on top of the earth symbol. It's like the full, okay, so the full moon might be like your full understanding of, embracing of, and shining light into your deepest subconscious. Above the crescent moon might be like you beyond the veil when you've done that. And this earth part might be bringing it back down to the real. I don't know, man, I just spit all these things. But there's my take on the Pluto symbol. Horus again. Yeah, dude, it does. It does. Good call. That's more masculine energy, though, too. And, of course, there's another interpretation of Pluto behind it, which looks totally different again. So, again, we didn't have Pluto in my book, but we've got this story of the origin of Pluto. Hades was not regarded as an evil god, but he was grim and implacable, and worshippers averted their eyes from his image when making sacrifice. In order not to draw attention to his role as king of the dead, he was referred to obliquely by the name of Pluto, giver of wealth. So he's the king of the dead, he's Hades, he's the underworld, and I did not know that before today. Pluto is Hades. I wonder if you guys can hear that car outside. So you may as well think of Hades when you think of Pluto, because they are one and the same archetype or representation. Hades abducted Persephone, the daughter of Demeter, his sister, the corn goddess. The girl was snatched when she bent to pick the 100-blossomed narcissus plant by Gaia in honor of Hades. Demeter was stricken by the loss. Fertility evaporated, springs ran dry, and death appeared among men. She wandered the earth looking for her daughter. Eventually, Zeus intervened and ruled that Persephone could return if she had not consented to her abduction in some way. But Persephone had eaten a pomegranate seed given her by Hades, so it was decreed she spend 6 months each with her mother and her husband. The yearly emergence of Persephone represents the power of growth in corn, and her time with Hades, the period of winter and death and dormancy. While Hades was generally a faithful lover of Persephone, he did stray once with the nymph. Persephone, when she found out, was so enraged that she turned the nymph into a sweet-smelling herb, mint. That was nice of her. I like mint. So that's interesting that the god of the underworld would be associated with winter, death, and dormancy, but they explain why. And then, of course, the feminine aspect would be, what reemerges in the spring. So it all makes sense. But so Pluto is that guy that steals the youth and the, abundance and whatever and kills it and makes it dead. But that's just part of the cycle, man. Pluto. So this is the distillation. Pluto, god of the underworld, is the ruler of Scorpio. In Greek mythology, this corresponding god was Hades. There we go. In astrology, the energies of Pluto are transforming. Pluto represents subconscious forces ruling all that is below the surface. That makes sense. Given the symbology too, right? The surface is the veil or the crescent moon and all that's below it here. But there's that little bit of consciousness there up on the upside. And on the upside, Pluto is associated with renewal and rebirth. It represents endings and new beginnings, as well as spiritual growth and rebirth. Negative expression of Pluto is an obsessive desire for power and control and general destructiveness. I don't associate that with the qualities so far presented. I guess so, actually, given the story. He did take the girl and snatch her without, against her will or whatever. That is kind of destructive, and it caused a lot of destructiveness. But you do need endings for things to begin. So that renewal and rebirth part is a nice part of the death, at least. In the chart, the position of Pluto by sign will be shared with other people in the same generation again. So we all have Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto in common, if we're of a similar age. By house, the position of Pluto shows where individuals search for truths and deeper meaning. The area of life may be associated with change, upheaval, power struggles, and issues of control. Interesting. So I'm going to just say Pluto makes the least sense to me because that sounds somewhat like Saturn to me. It's like a combination of Saturn and Neptune, maybe? Like the unconscious and the control. I don't know how it's different from them. I don't know what's new in Pluto. Maybe that's why they tried to get rid of it. They're like, this doesn't even make sense. We're just repeating shit now. I don't know, but that's interesting. Well, that's Pluto, and finally we have the Sun. Why didn't I start with the Sun? Because I just didn't. I started with the first planet, and that was the order I went in. And so here we have the Sun. I love this image of the Sun. If the Sun is an astral body out there, then this would be what it would look like in time lapse of all of the spewing of energy it shoots out, which is just rad looking. I love it. So there's a fun image of the Sun. It's also cool because, it's like this scientific, supposedly, whatever image, but it has that traditional, ball with all the lines coming out of it, like a lion's mane. So I like that about it, too. And when I look at it that way, I can even see a lion's ear, maybe a little face in there. Leo is associated with the Sun. This is the symbol for the Sun. If you have never seen it, it's just a circle with a dot in the middle. I interpret that as, this is the sort of center which the Sun represents in our solar system. If you look at the solar system model, the Sun is in the center and all of that flows around it. It gives life to all of those things. So you could look at it that way. It's like the center of all. And there's a lot that... No way, it didn't make it. Oh, you should be happy, actually, because there was like 3 pages from the Sun. Let me just find it and read you some of it, so that you won't be able to look at it. You'll look at this fun image of the Sun instead, and I'll try to speed through it. So, in theogony, the Sun represents the moment, surpassing all others in a succession of celestial dynasties, when the heroic principle shines at its brightest. So it's associated with that heroic moment of sort of conquering and like a success, I guess you would say. It is the son and direct heir of the God of heaven. So when we think about astrotheology, we can understand completely why Jesus and Mithras and all of these other sort of archetypal representations are associated with the sun. They share everything in common. The sun sees all, the sun knows all, because the sun, sees all the universe, all of the solar system, all of Earth, therefore it's omniscient. Associated, like I said, with the hero. And I'm just reading you the highlights because this is like the longest entry in this book, which in itself tells you a lot about the sun. In a given period of history and at a certain cultural level, the solar cult is the predominant, if not the only cult. Which is interesting if you think about, too, all of the solar cults all around the world, every single culture has a sort of aspect somewhere in history of a solar, if not currently, of a solar worship to some extent, a solar cult. And then if you look at all of our modern religions, they all sort of stem from or have everything in common with those solar cults. So it is a good argument that the solar cult is the only cult, possibly. There's a parallel between predominantly solar cults and the historical forms of human existence. So it's just saying, basically, if you have a solar cult, you're more likely going to be a society, a civilization, rather than just like a group of humans running around wild. So maybe there's sort of a civilizing aspect of the sun. Rome upheld solar sun worship. Dominated all other cults. Again, it says a heroic and courageous force, creating and guiding. The disappearance of the sun at the winter solstice gave it the sort of aspect of the moon somehow, and this like feminine energy in its death, I guess, and coldness perhaps, that it left behind it when it disappeared. And the sun and the moon together, of course, represent that sort of analogy between the heaven and earth, or as above, so below, or at the very least duality. I think they're stretching there a little bit. The sky is associated with godliness, and the sun is associated with the sky. It's like they're all in the sky, but I get what they're saying. The sky is sort of a masculine, ascendant energy or whatever, and the sky is associated with the same masculine sort of ascendancy. So that's really what they're trying to say. Solar passion, so to speak, with its heroic and fierce character, clearly had to be assimilated to the masculine principle, so that's why the sun became masculine. If you think about it, it makes sense. The sun shoots out energy. That is the masculine principle, as we've talked about before in Rogueways many times. That's a very masculine thing to do. The sun has an invincible character. It cannot be destroyed or diminished, although we're told scientifically that it's going to explode or burn out in millions of years or whatever. But it still has that feeling and that idea behind it. The sun necessarily implies the idea of resurrection, because it dies every day and comes back every day, because in the winter it's diminished, but it always comes back in the spring. So it has that aspect to its travels. It's a symbolic promise of protection and salvation from the dark, from the death, from the cold. It involves active faculties, that is, of reflection, good judgment, and willpower. So all of those masculine, active, intentional energies are associated with the sun. It is, of course, associated with gold. It is the sort of highest achievement. We think about lead as the lowest metal, and gold is the highest. The sun represents our crowning, self and achievement, or spiritually especially. Heat or energy equivalent to the fire of life and of the libido. So we have that sexual aspect of the creative energy of the sun as well. The dualism of the sun, however, still exists, and there is this thing about the black sun, or the soul Niger, or if that's how you pronounce that, to symbolize the prima materia, or the unconscious in its base, unworked state. So I guess like if you don't work with aspects of self and ascendancy in your own being to raise yourself up to that level of fold, then you're just letting that energy sort of, no way, again. Okay, last time. Okay. Hopefully you can hear me. Hopefully the reverb's gone and the echo's gone, whatever. But again, like nothing changed, and like 4 times in this I've had to redo that, and it doesn't make any sense. Back to the point. The black sun is an idea, and the best I can understand it is that if you haven't worked to accomplish transmuting yourself from lead at your base, most self, into the gold at your sort of crown, then that potential and that sort of tapped energy is sort of the black sun. That's what this seems to be indicating, which makes more sense to me, honestly, than a lot of the other esoteric interpretations of what the black sun is. But it's also pointing out that makes the sort of progress of the sun through the sky as it's like moving towards its a weird cave, but a better cave is what we're in now. At least you can understand me. We're almost done here anyway. Wow, 2 hours. Jesus. I'm going to wrap this up now. Anyway, it's a painful ascendancy to the sun's zenith if it hasn't had its like sort of main attributes activated is the interpretation they're going with. So that's what our resource had to say about the sun. And our Distillate resource says the sun is the giver of life. It represents our conscious mind. In astrology, it represents our will to live and our creative life force. Just as the planets revolve around the sun in our solar system, we derive our life purpose from the sun in our natal charts. The sun is our ego. It is our adult, the part of us that censors our inner child, that reasons things out and makes final decisions. The sun is our basic identity, representing self-realization. When you are asked, who are you, and you've passed your basic statistics and occupation, your answers will likely embody a description of your sun. The sun also represents our overall vitality. The sun directs us and can be considered the boss of our chart. So it's sort of like the visible and most easily translatable aspects of self that we can like communicate to another person, right? The part of ourselves that's most easily shared, most easily visible, those are our sun aspects, I think. There's obviously a lot more to us than that. So it is just that it's not surface, it's not shallow, it's just, I guess, you know, the most like safer work side of us or something. The sun is so important in a chart that the happiest people on this earth are those who identify without over-identifying with the sun's expression. Though one might think that the traits of the sun would come easily to them, the truth is the sun shows us we are learning to be. It is very important to remember that the sun represents reason as opposed to instinct. So it's very logical, mental conception of ourself. And just like we were talking about with the black sun possibly representing the aspects of self that you haven't yet sort of realized and actualized, that's again what they're pointing out here, that the sun shows us what we are learning to be. And the black sun is when we haven't yet actualized that. So it's an interesting interpretation of the black sun. I like it. And the sun, of course, is the easiest to represent. And I don't know why I didn't say it here, but again, I'm pretty sure it's associated with Leo. And so that is it. That's what I've got for you. And this sort of is a chart that shows you all of the symbols that we saw. Of course, we did not get to, if that is pronounced Ceres, I guess, or Juno, or Pallas, or Vesta. And you can't see Vesta because my face is covering it, but I'm guessing those are the north and south node and something else that I've never heard of. So maybe we'll do that in another episode. Definitely didn't mean for this episode to go 2 hours long. Can't believe that those of you who are here put up with all the sound issues. If I could fix it, I would in a heartbeat. Like I explained already, have no way of explaining anything that is happening, but hopefully it'll become better and better and better. And yeah, that's, I think about the astrological sort of archetypal energies and symbolism as more than anything a path of the self from, our unself sort of tapped and unworked with base metals and intentions and abilities and whatever, if we just left them and never paid any attention to them, we would not be going through this journey. But when we do, we start to work with them, and as we move, we sort of hit on all of the processes and aspects that we just went through on the astrological level. It's actually, you know, we look at it up in the sky and we see it all up there, but at the heart of it, it is this very personal, very individual journey that we are all going through, and we are all at various aspects of, various points of in the journey. So the goal, of course, is to incorporate all of them and to bring that back down into the physical in order to, again, share with the world and interact with the world the best we can. So until you master your journey and achieve your crowning, shining sun and do away with the black sun, travel well, aim for balance, and always look inside first. Mwah.
It's a one-on-one lesson, so do your homework. Make your dome hurt while up on earth. My bones are blessed from holy dirt. Vibes manifested to words that told me search for verbs and adjectives to describe birth. Worth more than one can speak, while the tongue beats a weak, a sour taste in your mouth, bittersweet. Words can also kill you when you sleep. Mind condition, low frequencies while the subconscious mind listens. I can tell a vision filled with lies, disguised as truth, and spread it like the word to the youth. Watch the tube. A place where the God gets food is sorcery. To recreate the God forgery does more than meets the eye. Not too many know. Just hear me flow like the eye of Horus Penio. Yeah, not ready to leave until we believe we're free to go. You hear me, yo?
From the ether, the material will eat ya. Stuck on this plane, lanes use jet fuel to greet ya. The dimensional three ain't meeting me on top of the fourth. Didn't climb Jacob's ladder to squab with a sword. Forged with Yggdrasil, branched down. Try quiet your lamps now. Ascension past the matter that they slam out they damn mouths. We ain't on land now, but they over in a stand. Sacrificing wisdom, hoarding dumber, kosher, wicked hands. Putting faith in worthless worship of the mortals. Artificial portals, mass ingestion of the black goo. Bioengineered morsels, conversing with machine elves. Bypassing maggots, they stuck on Android screens now. I'm scrolling like living lavish, off the backs of the savage. Them clasp hands at the Sabbath, smack of energy damage. They done twisted the tongues, with nanotech in the lungs. The awakening's begun, all they really can do is fucking run.